Looks like we're ready to go. So I am joined today by Liz DiFiore, who is from the Graphic Artists Guild, and Umair Kazi, who is from the Authors Guild, and Jessica Maison, who is from SFWA. I think I'm saying your acronym right, which is the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association.
Yes, you are saying it right. Yes.
Yay. I actually know that it's pronounced SFWA because one of my clients that I represent as a literary agent got into a horrible problem, and SFWA helped out.
Oh, great. That's great.
Because of that. A story for another day, unless we end up talking about it in the panel today. But
yeah.
So I would love to start things off by having each of you introduce yourself in a little more depth and talk about the path that led you to having the role that you have with your particular organization. So I'll call on you in order of little Zoom window boxes. So Liz, could you start us off?
Yeah, hi. So I'm located on the North Shore of Massachusetts, just above Boston. But I'm originally from Niagara Falls, New York. And moving to Boston is a little bit part of this story, which is I always wanted to be a children's book illustrator, and Boston is one of the, as many of you may know, is one of the largest hubs on the East Coast, other than New York, for children's publishing. So it was just natural that I was going to end up here at some point. And when my husband and I moved here in 2018, he got a job that was like stable for once for all of us. And it kind of became that question of, we could go solo. One of us could go solo. So I quit my job, which was in marketing, and went full-time freelance illustrator or in children's publishing, and just like bet the farm essentially to do that. And I did that for 5 years, rather, I think, successfully. But I had been out of the industry pretty much since I had graduated college. So I didn't have a network. We had just moved to a new location. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anything about the industry. But I did know that professional organizations are one of the fastest ways to create your own network. So I literally started Googling what associations were relevant. And I joined the SCBWI, which is the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. I'm sure many of you know that. And I joined the Graphic Artists Guild because I needed to learn how to business some stuff. And that is what the Guild specializes in. We are an organization for visual artists of many, many, many different types of skills and industries. And our primary purpose is to teach artists the business side of being a professional creative: contracts, contract language, copyright, advocacy, all of that you likely didn't learn in art school if you went to art school. And it works like a charm. Like, I went to my first meeting, I immediately started making friends. I told them I wanted to volunteer because I knew that was the in. That's like the biggest in to making your own network, is tell them you want to give them free time. And I conned them into a position with just helping out the regional representative of the area. And like 3 years later, I ended up as president of the organization because I can't set boundaries on my own time. No, that's not. That's a little bit. I think all of you kind of know what volunteering is like. You just you kind of have to be that person who doesn't say no. But it's a labor of love, and being exposed to the Guild just really made me realize the things about the industry that I cared a lot about, and a lot of things that I didn't know before, and how to make the industry better for people who were going to come into it after me. And so that became a major passion of mine, and the Guild, I felt, was the most ideal place to make that difference. So I was president of the Guild for 2 years, and just this year my term ended. So I'm now the immediate past president. And I do still take freelance illustration projects, but at the moment I'm doing artwork for my local TV station. And that's me.
Yay. Thank you so much, Liz. That is super interesting. And it's cool to hear that you did so much in such a short amount of time.
Through a pandemic, it was crazy.
Yeah. Okay. Next up is Umair.
Thanks. My name is Umair Kazi. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Authors Guild. Briefly about me, I had a kind of roundabout, long, circuitous path to my current position. I actually went to law school and graduated in 2010 during the financial crisis and was out of work for a while. I wrote grants for continuing medical education. And then I was like, well, I'm not really doing anything with my law degree, so I should do what I, so I should like try to do what I want to do. And I applied to MFA programs and got in, and I moved to New York, did an MFA. And while I was doing my MFA in creative writing and fiction, one of my professors, I told him that I had a law background, and he suggested that I intern with the Authors Guild. So again, free time leads to opportunities. And once I finished my MFA, there was a position that opened up here for a staff attorney. So I came on, and then I've been here since 2016. And the Authors Guild is the oldest and largest professional organization of authors in the US. We also actually have quite a few illustrator members as well, and we do cater to many children's book authors, traditionally published and self-published. I've worked with quite a few of them myself. We currently have over 14,000 members. We provide, as part of our member services, we provide a full suite of legal services. So you kind of, as one of our past presidents like to say, you have a lawyer on retainer. So now we have about our legal staff. We have 3 main attorneys that do member services. And then I work with our CEO and some of our other team on our advocacy projects. And we do a lot of advocacy in the areas of copyright, free expression, fair contracts. Right now, I mean, this year it's all been AI. So yeah, that's the brief sort of headline.
Awesome. There's a lot of stuff you said that I definitely want to circle back to. But let's go on to Jessica now for your introduction.
Okay, excuse me. Well, I'm from Michigan. I moved out to Los Angeles after I graduated from University of Michigan to become a screenwriter and work in the film industry. So I went through that path. I worked at CAA, I worked in feature film development, television, and I got my agent, did the screenwriting thing. And then I, similarly to Liz, got to a place where I'm like, I can quit my day job and focus on screenwriting. And then I got very sucked into nonprofit for a long time. So I was doing those things at the same time. And I had my children, and I had gone to college to write books, and I wanted to do that. So I started writing novels, and then I went to a Comic-Con and ruined my life. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's fine. And I had read comics a lot in my life, but I got really kind of enchanted with the combination of my love of like writing prose, but also screenwriting. And this was a way to do it a little cheaper visually, but differently. So I kind of self-taught myself comics and graphic novels and got to know people. And so I do write like short stories. I write novels. I write comics. I have my own little publishing company for comics. I've done traditional publishing and self-publishing. I got into SFWA because there's someone in the comments, Teresa, said it was her lifelong dream to be a member of SFWA. And every book I read as a child or as an adult had won a Nebula or won a Hugo Award. And I was like, that's where I want to be. I want to be with those people. And so that was also a dream of mine, to be a member of SFWA. So when I published my first short story, I just decided to apply because that is a way to do it as an associate member. And I got in, and I probably should upgrade, but now that I think about it, but And yeah, and then I went to the Nebula conference that year and got to meet a lot of people and see what that was all about and get to know the organization. And the weird thing is when I joined SFWA, there weren't comic writers. Comic writers weren't members yet. They hadn't figured out how to do that. So they had made a call for volunteers, and they said, we want to get a comics committee together and figure out how to properly get comic writers and solo illustrators into SFWA. And so I wanted that too. So I joined as a volunteer to do that and joined that committee. And we did a bunch of research, did a bunch of surveys, figured out kind of the best way to do that. And we were able to help the board bring in comic writers and solo illustrators. And now we are working on, and now they can also submit for a Nebula. And so we're working on the process of what that will always look like, or what that will look like in the future currently. And then somewhere along the lines, just a few months ago, someone had to step down from being comic chair. So I stepped up to be the comic chair. And so now I lead that group, but we're really kind of a small ragtag group of people working on just really welcoming in comic writers and figuring out what that looks like. So that's kind of my journey. So yeah.
Okay, so I feel like each of you in your introduction touched a little bit on the specific benefits of membership in your respective organizations. But before we talk a little more about that, I'm wondering, I feel like it can be kind of fun to hear a specific story, since we're all in the story business. And I'm wondering if any of you have an anecdote that really sticks out in your mind of something specific that happened where your organization played a critical role in resolving something or making a real difference in one of your members' lives, something like that.
Well, unless Liz or Umair want to go first. So one of the things that, because all of our grievance committee stuff is all very private, so it's hard to get that information. But we were involved in a very public advocacy moment where I think you guys all probably heard about it. Disney Must Pay. Did everyone? Because I think the Authors Guild was involved with that as well, and possibly the graph. And basically, one of our writers came to the SFWA and said, I've been writing serial novels for Disney for years, and suddenly he's not getting paid royalties on those. And that's because when they were sold to Disney, Disney said that they didn't buy the liability, they just bought the rights. They don't have to deal with all that. And you're a lawyer, so you probably understand. So Disney kind of really puts the onus on the writer to try to follow up with that. And if you are not like a big writer with lots of money and lawyers, it can be really complicated. So they came to SFWA, and SFWA kind of reached out to Disney and worked with them. And there's a task force now, and they got him paid, and are working with other writers to continue to get them paid and keep that dialogue open. And they have a big task force. I can't list everyone, but I know the Writers Guild of America is involved. I believe the Authors Guild is involved. Horror Writer Association is involved, and they are trying to make sure that companies can't do that, because the slippery slope of that is that Disney could sell their rights to one of their sister companies, right, and then never have to pay royalties. We don't have to deal with that contract. It's not our contract, and it already is kind of happening because I think there's this deal where I'm going to get into the weeds, so I'm going to stop. But yeah, that's one of the stories that stuck out in my mind. That was very visual, and you could see it on Twitter because there was a hashtag and everything like that. So
yeah, I was actually part of that task force and worked with SFWA. I mean, the Authors Guild has worked with both Graphic Artists Guild and SFWA. I mean, we have meetings with like these organizations pretty much every month, but sometimes multiple times a month. So I call like Graphic Artists Guild. I worked closely with Rebecca Blake when she was the advocacy liaison, and Michael Capobianco at SFWA. So it just feels like an extended coworker group, which is very nice. In answer to that question, there's a lot that I could say. I mean, when I was a staff attorney, and even now and then, we help people in contract disputes. So I've gotten people paid when publishers were not paying them. I think one of the recent high profile impactful things we did was getting Audible to change their 365 a day return policy, and also getting Amazon to change their ebook return policy, so authors were not losing earned royalties to returns. That was something that I was involved in. Disney Must Pay, certainly, and we also have members with other issues with Disney and some of the other big publishers like that. It's rewarding, especially when you're able to kind of like get an author money that they were they were owed, but like haven't been able to get for like months.
Is there, I don't know if any of you have read Checkpoint Capitalism, but is there a chapter in that book that's about Audible and about that policy specifically, I believe?
Yes, that policy, it's come under fire. There was a lawsuit against that policy as well, but was dismissed. Or the court found that actually there was no breach of contract. But yeah, it's
it's so fishy though.
Yeah.
Okay, Liz, how about with the Graphic Artists Guild?
Yeah, so one of the things that we worked on with the Authors Guild and SFWA and a whole bunch of other organizations was the creation of the CASE Act, which is the Copyright Claims Board that was created for small copyright claims. And I think it was 2021 that it was passed into federal law, after a whole at least 6 years of just lots of lobbying and letters and campaigns and everything. But that was actually one of my first ways of getting involved into copyright advocacy in the industry. Was I was at the time a regular volunteer, like I wasn't on the board or anything. And I also experienced copyright infringement. I have a shop on Redbubble where I sell stickers and such, and had been finding my stickers on other people's shops. And Rebecca Blake, who just stepped down this year as the advocacy liaison, she was one of my mentors, and her and her advocacy committee really helped me navigate like how to get things taken down, how to evaluate whether or not I wanted to pursue anything further. But the most impactful thing in my career, and I know for the artists who went with me, was when the Guild did an all call to artists who wanted to come down to DC with them for a Hill Day, where we were lobbying. I had never been to the nation's capital before, and there I was as a lobbyist for the first time, of all things. And there were artists from each of these organizations, musicians and actors and visual artists and authors, who we were meeting with senators and representatives from the House. In many cases, we were meeting directly with them rather than their staff, because we had done all of the groups had done such a good job of communicating how important this issue was for small businesses and individual businesses, such as freelancers. It was an incredible experience to see how our personal stories, when spoken face to face like that, could change somebody's mind who had the ability to change things on a federal level. And later that day, I had the very rare opportunity to sit in on the Senate Judiciary hearing that would determine whether or not that bill went to the Senate floor to be voted on as whether or not it would be considered for law. And many of the people that we had met with earlier that day were in that room to vote on this. So just being able to see the direct impact that telling my story as an artist, and being able to be in a position where I could meet with representatives like that, the Guild giving me that opportunity. They paid for my bus ticket down, you know, we had our hotel rooms covered for those couple of days. And it was passed in that meeting. And then later that year, it was passed into law. And now, if somebody has a small claim, an infringement case that damages are $15,000 or less per infringement, they don't have to hire a lawyer to be able to take it to court. They can take it to this small claims board, and there's obviously a lot more nuance involved in it than just that. But it's like something like that never existed before. It would have been tens of thousands of dollars to even consider taking a case to court for infringement before that. And now authors and artists and musicians and anyone who owns a copyright has that option. So that's been a huge inspiration through my career, and it's something that I regularly get to talk with others who went with me on that day, and talk about our experiences, because it was like you feel like you're this small fry who has no ability to change things on your own, and then you find out that sometimes those smallest voices, when brought together, can make the biggest changes, and that was the perfect example for me.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Oh, I love that story so much. So I guess I'm sure everybody here, you might be starting to formulate your own questions. So I would just want to say after I ask a couple more questions, I'm going to open up the floor so you guys can be thinking about what you want to ask. So I guess my next question would be for each of you, what kind of person do you think would benefit most from joining your organization? Or if you were talking to a fellow writer or artist who was thinking about it but maybe on the fence, like what would you say to try? Would you try to persuade them, and why would you do that? You can just jump in, I guess.
Umair, yeah, I was gonna say, Umair, you go first.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think if you're a published writer, for sure, I think joining the guild just has one of the biggest benefits of joining the guild is that anytime you have you know, if you're signing a contract, we'll review it and give you substantive detailed comments and on how to make changes, how to protect yourself against rights grabs, onerous terms, etc. You know, I mean, just being part of the community, all of our public, we do a lot of like public education and program, all of those programs are free because they're done through the charitable arm of the Authors Guild. It's called the Authors Guild Foundation. But you know, joining also gives you access to our member community. In some of the other benefits that we provide are we make and maintain a website for you if you don't have the facility to do that. You know, I mean, even if you're, I actually, like, we have a number of like indie and self-published writers that we help. In fact, like the last couple of years, we have a dispute escalation and resolution process set up with Amazon. So that's been really beneficial to self-published authors. I've helped, and I see my colleague, I won't call on him, but Daryl's on the call, who's now handles the Amazon issues. But we've been able to get authors, if their accounts were wrongly terminated. Sometimes, you know, Amazon changes their policy, or like you get dinged for some reason and you can't get anyone to undo the change, and you have like, you know, $15,000 or $20,000 sitting in that account. So we've been able to get people that money back. Counterfeits, piracy, you know, we've really sort of like worked with Amazon to tamp down counterfeit and pirate books on their platform. So you know, even if you don't have a contract review, you can join for like all of these other services that we provide, and you just have like access to, you know, lawyers and advocates that do this day in and day out. So if any questions come up, you can just send us an email.
Great.
And I think I'm just going to kind of second that. For SFWA, you have there's support, there's advocacy, there's people there for resources. There's a lot of resources on the website, the members only section. When you have different questions, you can reach out. One other reason that I think is great for young writers, like new writers, less established writers, or even like mid-sized writers, is that the community, and you do have to kind of jump in and engage, but like if you're, I know that the middle grade YA has meet up once a month, I know the romance writers do it. I know we're going to start doing it, where you can get to know the different members. So I think community is really important, and going to the professional conferences can be really great ways to get to know other writers and people that you're working with. But yeah, I mean, just having an organization that you can connect with and check in with when you are having a issue with Amazon specifically. I mean, that's great that the Authors Guild has that, because yeah, you feel kind of all by yourself, and this is a way not to feel all by yourself as a writer, which I know we all kind of get isolated sometimes. So
it's hard not to work in a silo when you're when you're an artist of any kind. Yeah, I would say advocacy is a really big reason why many people do join the guild, is because they want to have a hand in changing the industry for the better. But I think I think one of the major things that I hope none of my colleagues think I'm outing them, but one of the major things that a lot of our members have in common is that they all kind of come to the Graphic Artists Guild starting from a place of imposter syndrome, where they feel like they're not charging enough, but they don't know how to charge more. They feel like they are getting taken advantage of by clients in copyright language, but they don't know how to change that. They don't know how to negotiate. They don't know whether or not they are. And they want to feel more confident in themselves as a business person, in marketing themselves, in all of those aspects of being a professional creative. And that doesn't seem to matter what stage of your career you're in. It's easy to say that somebody who's just starting out in the industry is going to have that's easy. We all know, we've all been there. But people who are late stage in their career, who are trying to develop themselves in a new style, or they're trying to branch out from what they're doing, or they just feel like they've been stuck in a rut for a while and don't know how to evolve, the Graphic Artists Guild can be extremely helpful with giving you the tools and the resources to empower yourself as a business professional, whether you're volunteering with us or you're just being a lurker and attending our webinars, or just getting our book and our updates, or participating in our surveys so that we can have more data sets for people to be able to rely on. I feel that is one of the biggest benefits that members get from engaging with us on any level at any point in their career, is the confidence to charge what they're worth, to negotiate fairly, to feel like they're not being taken advantage of because they come to the table educated.
And I think you publish the Graphic Artists Guild Handbook. Is that the title of it? There's an amazing
so it's the Pricing and Ethical Guidelines Handbook, and it is available to anyone who wants to buy it. But if you are a member, you get it complimentary with your membership, and you get the updates complimentary. The cool thing about getting it through membership is you also get digital copies of various resources within there, such as boilerplate contract language.
Great. All right. So, Umair, you mentioned in your introduction that you do advocacy on copyright issues and AI and freedom of expression. And that I did mention in my description of today's panel that we would talk about hot button topics. And I guess my question for you, almost to start things off, is how in the world are you handling it? Because it feels like it's just so many issues to be dealt with right now, and you probably all have small teams. So I don't know what you have to say about, but how are you managing all these really difficult issues all at once?
Yeah, no, I mean, it has been quite a challenge. We did actually We have our staff is a little bigger this year. We hired 2 new staff attorneys and then a chief legal officer. Before that, it was primarily myself and our CEO, Mary Rassenberger, who were doing all of the advocacy stuff. Something that we rely on often is the support of our peer organization. So we do have coalitions that we work in. We have a creators coalition for AI that includes, Graphic Artists Guild, SFWA, and we meet every month and organize together. Might do like a Hill Day and take some of the other organizations with us but yeah, it's we recently brought a lawsuit against OpenAI. So it's been an extremely busy time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
No, that's all I was gonna say.
Okay. This year especially, our current president, Yannick DaCosta, and our current advocacy liaison, Delaney West, I feel have done an incredible job empowering a team of volunteers who have been really passionate. And they're not, I think the main thing I want to make a point of is that they're not just passionate about like down with AI. They're really passionate about learning to understand it and the nuances of the issue, because the issue is often not as cut and dry as like for or against. And there are so many different aspects to consider. It's one of the reasons why our organizations have been so busy, is because there's so much to learn about it in order to be able to say definitively that we stand on this issue, we stand on this issue, we stand on this issue. And one of the things the Guild has done is created a living document. Actually, do you mind if I share it?
Go ahead. Hold on. Let me make sure I think I have to enable. Okay. Yes, you can share.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to share this link, which is our position statement. And it's a living document because as things change within how companies are handling their policies, how the federal government or state governments are handling their policies or creating them at all, we're updating as those things change. And being able to like stay up to date on that is difficult. It feels like it changes every day in terms of new information and what you need to know in order to feel like you have an educated opinion on it. And as these other wonderful organizations with me, we stand with artists and we want them to have proper credit. We want them to be compensated for their work. We want their original efforts to be recognized as they are and respected. But AI or machine learning, more specific, like more accurately, machine learning is it is a technology that isn't going away, and so there's a lot to learn and understand before people decide what their hardline opinion and outspoken opinion on it is going to be.
And I think SFWA has that very similar messaging where, they made, I was very happy with how quickly they were addressing it and getting involved in it. They sent out, an initial email to all of us explaining like what their stance was and what they were working toward, and it is very much not a for or against, but we need to learn it and we need to be actively engaged in it and actively advocating when we need to be. They did send, and I think Liz just basically said it, but they sent us like 4 things that were very important. Creators must be compensated, their contributions need to be credited, their privacy needs to be protected, and we have norms in publishing that need to continue, even with AI. So if you're using AI as a tool, that these things all need to be protected and maintained. And so I know SFWA feels very strongly about those 4 points, and they have created an emerging technology committee. And as Umair said, they're joining WIN Task Force. And so I'm feeling pretty protected as a member, at least having the resources to know what we're working on and being able to keep up with it. It's nice to have an organization sending you information so you can keep up with it, because there's so much writing about AI right now, and knowing what you should be actually reading and paying attention to is something that organizations like this can help with as well. So yeah.
All right, I would love to open up the floor if anybody here has a question that you'd like to ask.
Well, we answered them all.
I do have a question. Hi, everyone. I'm Eileen.
Hi.
I don't know too much about AI. I've kind of played around with it a little bit stupidly, and it was both stupid and fun. But as far as if I ask a question, say in ChatGPT, or whatever I'm using, is somebody knowing what I'm asking? I mean, is there a real person that's keeping files on, okay, this was asked or that was asked? It's kind of creepy if it is, but am I giving an idea away by doing that?
The ChatGPT's terms of service say that anything that you put in as input can be used by them. So I don't know if like they're because the volume is so much there, but they'll probably analyzing that data in the aggregate. So I mean, and it's used in training further iterations of the.
Very likely there's not a person who's reading it, and they're putting it through the algorithms that they've created in order to analyze it. And often that's how AI machine learning evolves, is it self learns from the data that's put in. It's just too much data for a human to ever go through, no matter how big your team is. So it's likely that a human is not reading it, but that doesn't mean it's not being read.
Yeah, a machine can.
Or used.
Art that I make is, I mean, you can just look at it and say, hey, draw such and such. You know, it looks like this, and it would probably come up with the same exact thing. So I haven't even gone that far to see if it actually does, but I'm worried about it being protected in that way, that somebody can just look at what I have and say, okay, draw this that looks like this. And then,
so one of the really interesting things about, interesting to me, my husband actually works on AI, not for art, but for military applications. So it's like learning about it has been like super interesting on a personal level. And one of the very interesting things is that you're very likely never going to get the same result twice, ever, because this is kind of a pro and a con of them scraping so much information from the internet, whether it was copyrighted or not, is that the bigger the data set, the more results that can come out of it. And what it's doing, it's not taking, like when you ask for an apple, it's not taking images of an apple that it collected and, you know, like recreating it into a new apple. It's breaking everything down into all of these various different parts to the point where it is no longer an apple, no matter where it got it from. And when it's recreating it, it is creating something that hasn't existed before in that's a tough thing for me to say, because I don't think that's entirely accurate, and I don't want to give like wrong information. But it's not as easy an answer as if you put an idea into AI, will somebody steal it? Or will somebody create something that is the same? The short answer to that is no, but there is a lot of nuance within that answer that I don't think I am the best person to be able to say. I can't think of words right now. Umair was like nodding. You were just going to be able to better explain what I'm trying to get at.
No, that all makes a whole lot of sense. And it was just a worry point for me, like, oh my gosh, am I giving away secrets, or I don't know what I might be giving away? Is somebody going to be able to duplicate the same thing that I've been doing? But it sounds like it's probably not going to be as easy to do that as what I think, right?
Yeah.
With images.
Yeah, I mean it's also
with
like
images.
Yeah.
The responses it provides are like, So, like Liz mentioned, the size of the data, but if, for instance, there are images that repeat a lot in the data, or some very distinct images, like style, like what, I forget that
like the Mona
artist
Lisa.
name.
Okay.
Would be an
Mona
easy
Lisa,
example.
Yeah. So it's I mean, it would have like a lot of it, when they train the model, they give like all of these terms weights. So, popular, prominent things are weighted like stronger. So like that's why you can get like, more easily get something like in the style of George R. R. Martin, because it's just like it's come into the training data from so many sources, because in so many different places.
Okay.
But yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense. So thank you all for clarifying that. I appreciate it. Meanwhile, I had to go get my lunch. That's why my background was moving.
I think Bonnie had a question.
Well, my question was very simple. I'm also bouncing off of this, but my question was just like you talk about social connections. What are the kind of social connecting opportunities? Are they local? Are they being done on Zoom now? My experience with SEBI as a member for decades is that it's expensive to go to conferences. I'm going somewhere, when I was going somewhere out of my own town and never seeing these people again. Not really, it's really too congested and too busy, and, to actually have very easy development of a connection beyond the moment.
Yeah.
At that time, before we had Zoom, and and it's been a while now. Now I'm just not traveling like that. And then when I had a lot of time, when I lived in places where there was a good active group, I was, I'm sure other people are in these boats kind of, I was busy parenting and working full time and trying to do this on the side, and really couldn't afford the time, or couldn't get there. It was like a work night, Monday night, and really exhausted. And then when I've had the time, I've been in places where there was nothing, like one other member or a small group, but they're really not doing anything. And unless I wanted to, somehow scour and find the people, like even where I live now, I used to be in a group with, I'm sorry, with Leo was in this Illustrators group, but we live in very disparate places. He had to travel far away. I had to travel less far away, and a lot of people were traveling, and it fell apart. So I'm just wondering. Yeah, what can you speak about that?
Yeah. I mean, I hear what you're saying, because I've gone to conferences where, you have big expectations of, you're going to meet people and it's going to be great. And then it's just kind of, not what it is. I do think, like with SFWA, what I have noticed is a lot of our subgroups, different genre groups, are doing Zoom meetups, and they seem to, especially at the middle grade YA one, they just got started, and it seems like I haven't been able to go. I'm going to try to go to the next one. It seems like everyone's really excited about it, and it's been really positive. And I know a few of our other subgenres have like those groups, and we are definitely, as the comics committee, trying to start them. I do see that we have a lot of opportunity to participate in different Zoom workshops, Zoom meetups in general. You just have to pay attention to what's being posted and the emails. The Nebula conference now, they have an online package. And what's interesting about that is, it used to just be a conference that happened one location once a year. Well, after COVID, it kind of got redefined, and now there's always an online package that you can purchase, and that goes all year. So they do things all year that gives you access to it. So say you're not a SFWA member, but you want to be part of these groups. This is my understanding. I could be wrong, but if you purchase the online year-long Nebula conference package, you have access to some of these other online community meetups, which is nice. I mean, it's not, the cost is about the same as like an associate membership, so it's not a big difference. But so there are a lot of opportunities now to connect, at least within our group, digitally. I had the same issue. I'm coming out of the motherhood, like I still have my kids, they're still at home, but like the real hardcore time where you're like, I don't have time for any of this. But yeah, so I hear you on that.
One of the great places to engage with groups online that I've seen is actually Discord. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the Discord app. It's both it can be both a desktop application and on your phone. But it's a forum. It's place for you to have conversations. Kidlit Art is one of the most active ones that I've been involved with, and that kind of came out of an SCBWI group, Kidlit community, and you can just Google Kidlit community Discord, and you'll probably find the invite for it. And that's been a place that I've found a lot of SCBWI people will go to find groups. Embracing the digital way of connecting is probably the best opportunity that is available, especially since the pandemic. Everyone's had to adapt, and a lot of those opportunities have not gone away. I have a local illustration crit group that I joined, that I learned about through the SFWA when I was earlier in my career. And they used to meet in person every month. And since the pandemic, we only meet in person like once every 6 months or once a quarter or something like that. And the rest of it we do on Zoom, even though we're local. And there are a lot of reasons for that, mostly because people are really busy. They have kids at home. They have a lot going on. And it can be a lot even to travel 20, 30 minutes to get to the illustration meetup point. So to hop on Zoom for a couple of hours and show your work. And I know it can, I know a lot of people have had a hard time adapting to the Zoom format of meeting. And I think that's really valid because everyone's technology abilities and access are different. And that's something that I feel like is hard to navigate, but I can actually put an invite, I think, in the chat for the Kidlit community for anyone who's interested. But yeah, just being able to start to embrace the online aspect of participating in those groups, finding forums to participate in, I think is the best opportunity available at the moment.
Denny, you have your hand up, and I want to make sure you get to ask your question.
Hi. I am wondering if you all could speak to the difference between a union and a guild. I was in a union previously, and I think it was different than what a guild is. And so I'm interested in just hearing your take on what the difference is between the two types of organizations. But also, I know from my previous experience in my union was that a lot of people just really aren't aware of the rights that they have as workers. And I'm wondering if you could talk about what rights, freelance workers, or creators have that we might not know about.
I can take a shot at answering that. Yeah, it's a really good question, really interesting question. So a labor union is a very specific legal entity. Let me just say that. So, but you may have an organization that calls itself a union, but it's not a labor union. Or you might have a guild that calls itself a guild, like the Writers Guild of America, but is a labor union under the law. So just the terms, just the name of the organization isn't really indicative of its sort of legal legal standing as a labor union or not. Under US law, only employees are allowed to form labor unions. If you're an independent contractor, the law assumes that you have enough bargaining power to sort of set your own rates. And in, vice versa, considers if independent contractors or like freelancers are joining together in collective action, that is generally prohibited by antitrust law. There's a long history of how we ended up here that I'm not going to go into, but we've been working on these issues quite a bit, especially spurred by the pandemic, because one of the things that we understood very quickly was that our members who are freelancers were not getting unemployment benefits at a time when they most desperately needed. So we did some lobbying around that, and then there was the pandemic unemployment assistance sort of provision in the CARES Act that did allow independent contractors for specific amount of time to get unemployment benefits. But I think in the creative sectors, it gets really tricky because and it depends on how like the particular subsector is organized. So, and it depends on kind of like the labor and organizing history of that subsector. So for instance, screenwriters, they are a labor union, but that means that they don't have their copyright. They're considered the employee of the production studio that hires them. Same with actors, same with the Writers Guild, like TV screenwriters. If you're like a staff writer at a publication, you can form a union. But again, like anything you write as a staff writer is owned by your employer. You don't have copyright in it. The benefit of like being a freelancer is that you have copyright. You can exploit it in different ways. You write a book, you can like license it into a movie, like especially for like illustration and kidlit, like there's a lot of like merchandising opportunities that come with it. But nevertheless, there is a disadvantage in the sense that you don't have those benefits, and publishing is not an industry. It's not like you're a local plumber or an electrician that can kind of set your own rates and have like and bargain for your services at arm's length. Publishing is very standard. There's very little room to negotiate changes. Especially, and if you're self-published, you have no leverage against Amazon, which, so for those reasons, we've been working on like legal and policy solutions, trying to get an antitrust exemption for creative workers so they can engage in collective bargaining, set minimum standards like the screenwriters, and boycott bad actors, etc. We also had a proposal to change to make an amendment to the National Labor Relations Act that would allow creative workers to collectively bargain in that way. And we've seen some of these things happening in Europe, for instance, where they passed an antitrust exemption for like platform workers, gig workers, recognize based on the principle that they just don't have any leverage to negotiate individual contracts. And hence they need collective bargaining, and which is basically the logic that we have been, promoting and advocating for here. It's a long-winded answer, but it was a very interesting question.
I was in 820 USA 829, which was under the umbrella of IATSE as a theater designer, and we were freelance employees. So we were paid on 1099s as freelancers, but we were also considered to be employees and were able to organize as workers.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yeah.
There have been a lot of you can follow the laws that have been happening, or the bills that have been happening in California, especially regarding gig workers and whether or not they qualify as employees or freelancers under the law. And I know New York State has also been trying to better define that. And I've been out of it for a little while, so I can't pull a lot of that info off the top of my head at the moment. But in general, if you are a freelancer, you are not an employee. And there are some specific rules around whether or not you should be considered an employee, including how much that organization how much they control your hours and what type of work you do and who you do work for. So whatever state you're in or country, I know we have a couple of international people here, you do have to look up what your laws are, and whatever organization you're a part of, or if you join one of our organizations, you can receive help in navigating that and figuring out what protections you might have. And if you don't, whether or not there are any actions you can take or join actions that may help change it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I actually, a question occurred to me as we've been talking that I would like to wrap up with, unless there's anybody else here who's like, I have one question I have to ask. Okay, so my question is, as I said earlier, there's a lot of hot button issues going on right now, but I'm really wondering, and I'd love to hear from each of you, if there's any issues that you wish got more attention that aren't like talked about all the time in the news, or that you feel like that are really important for creative people, but just don't get the attention that they need.
Yeah.
Liz?
So just to be clear, you're asking about issues that we feel are not getting enough attention.
Yes.
Hiring homework. Oh my God, I hate it. For those of you who are not aware, hiring homework is this abysmal practice that is especially bad in the tech industry, but designers really get the brunt of it as well. And I don't know how much writers get this, but it's like where you are applying for a job or a contract, and they ask you to do free work in order to prove that you are a good fit for this. Self-publishers, actually freelancers who are working with self-publishing authors or illustrators, do experience this quite a lot, because people who are inexperienced in the publishing industry, and I have a ton of love for self-publishing authors. They have been my bread and butter as clients. All of my books have been done with self-publishing authors. Love that industry. But man, there's so many people where you contact them, you say like, oh, you're looking for an illustrator? Here's my portfolio. This is a great example of what I can do. And they go, yeah, but can you draw my character? I'd like you to do, here's a sample script. Can you do a sample page? Send it to me, and then I will decide whether or not you get this work. That's hiring homework. You're doing free work, and that is not okay. You need to be compensated for that work. Anytime you are doing new work, original work, that they're either, especially if they're planning on using it in whatever it is that they're doing, regardless of whether or not they hire you. Oh my God. So obviously I have a bit of a soapbox on this. And unfortunately, there's so many other like major issues in the industry that we have to focus on, so it doesn't get a whole lot of attention. But thank you for giving me a platform.
I love your answer.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Jen. I was just going to agree with her, and not just about hiring homework, just in general, best practices, best business practices, etiquette, things like that could save a lot of newbies and oldies of seasoned people a lot of uncomfortable conversations, because I see a lot, especially in comics, you see a lot of fights. I know if you're in any groups, you see a lot of fights coming down between writers and publishers and artists, like, whether it's about rates, whether it's about what expectations of what's free work, what's not free work. There really shouldn't be free work. I am both a writer and I am a publisher with comics. And you really, if you're going to have someone do design work or character work or something like that, there's a fee for it. But I think a lot of people don't realize it, as Liz said. And so like, I do kind of also agree. I wish there were more best practices, resources at all the organizations, like, hey, you're going to have an interaction with a graphic designer. Hey, you're going to have an interaction with a lawyer, just all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, that's what we are here for, and we could spend a little more time on it,
Yeah. And I would say along the same lines, just bargaining power and collective the ability for, creative workers to come and collectively bargain, boycott. Like, I think that's a very important issue that, especially with AI on the rise, has been, unfortunately eclipsed. But you can't have one without the other. Like, these protections, copyright only goes, it can help you to a certain extent, but not when, like, you just don't have any ability to negotiate contracts or terms of service with the platforms.
Oh yeah, terms of service. I wish everybody would read the book by Cory Doctorow that I mentioned earlier, Choke Point Capitalism. All right, this has been such a great conversation. At the end of these events, I always like for everybody, if possible, to unmute yourself and say thank you to our speakers, because it was so informative. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This was fantastic. You might be seeing an influx of new members.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
I hope I see some of your faces at some of our online events.
That'll be fun. We'll see you.
All right.
Thank you so much for having us, Jana.